Okay, item 4, communication from the public. To comply with provisions of the Open Meetings Act, the City Council may not deliberate on items discussed under this agenda item. The council may refer this item to the city manager or direct this item to be placed on the next regular council agenda. PowerPoint presentations are not conducted during the citizen comment period. Out of respect for those speaking during public comment, please refrain from any outbursts or interjections to include but not limited to applause and/or disparaging noises from the audience. Doing so discourages others from voicing their thoughts and opinions and disrupts the meeting.
And for those of you that are going to speak, you get 3 minutes. I'll give you this when you got 1 minute left, and red when your time is up.
Lee Coggins.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. I'm here tonight not as a former, well, I'm a former member of the Drainage Committee, but I come here to speak to you tonight as a previously flooded resident of Friendswood. Okay, 2 suggestions I would like to make is that I fully support the upcoming bond election for drainage and flood mitigation. I'm willing to pull out my wallet today to pay $50, $100, $200 for this coming year. What I would like to suggest is that you don't limit how or where the funds be spent. Use sound engineering judgment. Don't specify particularly, although I support the channeling and shelving and benching. Please don't leave out possible detentions and ponds that could be helped to alleviate. Not only am I concerned about another Harvey, but I'm also concerned about another instant rainmaker where we get 23 feet of rain in like 6 hours to 12 hours period. That water has to run somewhere. And I'd like to demonstrate that with a quick demonstration since I can't have visual aids. If this is a typical benching shelving of Clear Creek, if it rained, all that water will go right in Clear Creek. If we have detention ponds and detention basins, the example of this, all that water that once fell in the same area now goes in the cups or detention basins before it goes in the drainage ditches. So I want to make sure you keep your options open. And the other point I would like to make is that I would like to suggest you team with Harris Flood Control District to possibly divert water away from Friendswood by using Turkey Creek tributaries and drainage ditches. A lot of that infrastructure already exists. We could use the undeveloped areas between 2351 down to I-45 at Clear Creek to create a great alternative drainage path for Clear Creek that would route the water around the city. I would encourage you to look in that development. Although Dr. Bedient did a study of diverting 50% of the water coming to the creek, I'm advocating taking the water from the creek, creating a big enough channel to divert that water away from Friendswood. So I'd like you to look into that as well. Okay.
Thanks, Lee. Bill Radiso.
Mayor, council members, I'm here to ask you to please take a hard look at what the citizens have done to build upon the work of the subcommittee and the contacts they've made and things they've brought to the city's staff members, and to not short us on the dollars for this project, to make sure that this gets completed, as we know it's going to be expensive, and we know that there are numerous individuals that will work to support this. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. Vicki Hefner.
Hello, everyone. I am here and I am for all the things that we propose to help our drainage in Friendswood. I did not get home for 2 days. I spent 2 nights at the activity center before I could get home. Once I got home, it flooded. We do need to take care of the flooding, but we also need a place to stay. And we need to make sure, because even on today at the activity center, the 50-year-old building had a leak from the little rain that we had this afternoon. We just need to make sure, because the drainage is going to take so many years to take care of. It is a long, long project. We need the ability to have a place for someone to stay and spend the night and at least take a shower. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Vicki. Rob Roy.
Mayor, City Councilman. Been a resident of Friendswood for 27 years and love living here. 17 years ago, I moved into the Analia subdivision, which does not have an HOA. Went through a real problem with barking dogs for almost 2 years when I first moved into the subdivision. Some people loved me and some people didn't like me very much. It's been real quiet there for the last decade until about 5 months ago when my next door neighbor directly behind me moved in with 2 loud barking dogs. I was actually going to bring a sound effects thing, but I think it's going to be inappropriate. If you've ever heard a Great Dane barking, it's crazy loud. This dog will bark for hours at a time, multiple times during the day, sometimes a couple hours at a time. I'm a real estate broker. I work out of my home, so you can only imagine how annoying it is. It is so loud that I can actually hear it inside my home when the dog is inside its home. I've called the police several times. Animal control has been out. They've talked to the clients. And it's kind of a catch-22 because animal control says, well, it wasn't barking when we got there. We did talk to the homeowner. They're going to try to do something about it. You need to maybe do a recording, which I've done, several recordings, and do an unobserved misdemeanor. So I went to the police department and did file one with several incidences of when these things occurred. And I was somewhat aghast when I came back to check that the prosecutor decided that I needed to talk to animal control. It's like, okay, you talk to animal control, they say do an unobserved misdemeanor. I went back a second time and I got the same answer with an unobserved misdemeanor charge. So, I mean, really that's why I'm here. Now, I got lucky, I guess, one police officer did actually hear the dog vehemently barking and did write a citation. However, I'm just telling you, it just hasn't resolved anything whatsoever. So I'm asking for some assistance to resolve this with the prosecutor, you know, what we can do to get this dog quiet. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Lillian Wilson.
Hello, my name is Lillian Wilson, and I live in the only block of Quaker's Landing that doesn't have a flood house on it. So it's important to me. And I've lived here 25 years and been through the 2 major floods that came through here. But what many people do not realize, we see small ones in that neighborhood still. We saw one in May where the water reversed directions and came up through our storm sewers into the streets. It makes everyone very nervous when that starts happening. It goes in the yards, it goes in the garages, it goes in the pools. But it's a small problem, right? Our neighborhood has, and other neighborhoods have become the retention pond for this city. And that's not right. We shouldn't have to be that for everyone else. We're going to flood again. And the likelihood that any of you are on the council when that happens is actually not very good. They're spaced out to the point where most of you will be off the council by the time the next flood comes. So you're not going to have to face me a second time. I'm asking you to carefully consider what is before you on the bond, to be sure that what you propose is something that we're going to be able to do, or that the other agencies are not going to say no. And that we continue, as has happened before, with proposals and such that have come to the city, that it just doesn't happen. Army Corps of Engineers says no, or Army Corps of Engineers says, we got to look at it for 10 years. We can't afford that. You'll be gone. I'll still be there. And my friends will still be there. And I've seen, after the first flood that came through, I watched the families, a lot of them sadly move away because they couldn't afford it. New ones move in. They sadly move away because they cannot spend their life savings repairing the house. Flood insurance doesn't get it done. So I ask you to carefully think about that as you do it. It's a hard decision. You got to raise taxes to do it. Nobody likes that, but I'm asking you to be brave. Give us the opportunity to sell it to the city, to help them understand why it is so important that something gets done to protect the neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thanks, Lillian. Connie Radiso.
Have handouts.
Oh, my gosh.
Hi, my name is Connie Radiso. I live 5327 Apple Blossom. I know you're probably expecting me to talk about the numbers on the proposed bond for drainage. Others are going to talk about that, but I want you to know that I support fully funding the bond. I don't want it underfunded. You've all promised, or several of you have promised to fix the problem. Let's actually fix the problem. But what I'm going to talk about is something to look forward to, maybe in the future. We're going to have, if this bond passes, 10 miles of land that's been along the creek that's been terraced. And if we think to the future, that could be parkland. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that all 10 miles is manicured, mowed by our staff. Parkland, a lot of it could be natural parkland, grasses, stuff like that. But there's some goals with this that we put together when I was on the Parks Cat team. Said the goals would be to create trails and park system along Clear Creek in coordination with Clear Creek's drainage projects, focusing on beautification, recreation, preservation, education, and congregation. Provide a multi-use system for citizens, locate existing trails, and there are a lot of them already, existing parks to form desirable routes, utilize existing buyouts and city-managed properties, involve stakeholders in the planning process, have the citizens involved in it, address interests of participating members. We can improve the pedestrian accessibility, safety, and remove barriers, provide better connectivity to popular destinations, our existing parks, maintain environmental integrity, conserve and respect natural resources and processes, limit impact of the trail development, and I am not going to get through this. That's why I gave you the handout. We have so many parks along our creek already. There are also future parks that we could look at. The areas at Dixie Farm, Clearview, Quaker's Landing, Friendswood Link Bridge, Harvey's Landing, which you guys know as Deep Woods, and the Public Works, the old Public Works, Whitcomb property. There's lots of things that we could do along there. We can do nothing, or we can make it into very enjoyable areas. And I've already posted some of this on social media, so some people already know it. In 2012, the Houston Parks Bond had us listed as part of it. In the 2020 Bayous Greenway Initiative, we were removed from it, but that's probably because that's just City of Houston. There are many partners that we can use to do this. In the bond, we only had two sections. We had the drainage, where we asked for park design. I do not see anything about park design. The part of the parks is only to work with other partners that are available, Texas Wildlife and a lot more. Anyway, thank you.
Thanks, Connie. Gail Lovely.
Good evening. I'm back. Tonight you decide on if you will put forward bonds to the citizens for a vote. I urge you to consider carefully. I'm going to focus, of course, on the drainage bond. No surprise. First thing, pay attention to the details. Citizens have repeatedly stated the desire to plan for green space and parkland. This requires engineering and planning from day one, not an afterthought. The materials you'll see tonight do not mention this requirement at all. If it's your decision not to plan for green space or parkland, state it. Do not let it slip by just as an omission. If you're supporting this goal, add it to the documents tonight. Move forward with it. If not, tell us why you're not supporting the decision of the drainage as a green space. Second, pay attention to the details. Removing more dirt will lead to less flooding. Future design and engineering work will refine the amount of dirt to be removed and where it will be removed, all without touching the creek. The early numbers are preliminary and serve as a guideline, but this is not a place to scrimp. Pay attention to the details. Why include dredging in the bond language? I'm not sure anyone wants an ugly dredged creek, and as Russ Poppy, the executive director of HCFCD, stated in a recent meeting here at City Hall, that would cost an additional $50 million in Friendswood alone. Pay attention to the details. Time matters. Getting started, getting funding, getting engineering, getting work done, all will take time. Costs rarely go down with time. Make sure there's adequate funding for contingencies, inflation, considerations to last the length of the bond work. Pay attention to details. Underfunding a project from the start will cause delays, unfinished work, and the need for more funding later. Why not let the citizens, they'll be the ones paying, decide if paying Friendswood full share for this more than $200 million project with contingency and inflation is too much? The difference of less than $1 a month in 10 to 15 years could lead to an unfinished project due to lack of funding and foresight, and be far costlier to far too many. Let the citizens know the costs and vote on them. Plan big. Don't decide to hope for richer partners, hope for less inflation, hope for generous landowners, hope for a second bond. Let the citizens of Friendswood get this work off to a good start with the funding needed for the project to be successful. And if those hopes for rich partners, lower inflation, and designs which are less costly come our way, we can decide not to issue the maximum bond amount authorized this year. But if we need it, it is best to budget based on science and engineering, not on hope. I hope you consider these details tonight.
Thanks, Gail. Ron Lovely?
Thank you for giving me a chance to speak. The handout that you have there, I'm only going to talk about the top chart, but the other charts are there. Hopefully you'll take my comments into consideration. Later tonight, the city manager will present the charts on a proposal for the drainage bond. In that set of charts, there are omissions. If you approve that proposal, you'll need to explain, and it's real simple, explain why no accounting for G&A, why drainage is not integrated into a park design, why are buyouts not fully accounted for, and why no accounting for inflation. So it really boils down to those four things. The HCFCD costing formula uses $3 per cubic yard for G&A. This covers management, administrative, ongoing engineering support, contracting, purchasing, legal support. Our project will have government requirements and government oversight. We will be jumping through hoops. It will require G&A. Contingency is for unknowns in early planning. It does not cover G&A since G&A is known. The reason that you design the parkland and integrate drainage into the parkland design is the consequence if you don't. Engineers know that you'll end up with a ditch that you later have to fix to make it look good. The buyout figure in tonight's package is $30 million. And that was originally for 100 properties for $300K. Today it's 60 properties for $500K. There are many ways to make it be $30 million. The CAT identified the actual properties in the floodway to be purchased and accounted for uncertainty. Their number is $48 million. It has a basis. The $30 million figure with contingency comes to $39 million. The difference from $48 million saves an average household 15 years from now 24 cents per month. 24 cents isn't worth jeopardizing the project and flooding more homes. Not accounting for inflation is a killer. The CAT recommended a modest 3% per year. Both HCFCD and Galveston County have seen more in recent years. And there will be competition for resources. Omitting inflation for low or lowballing it will leave us with a lot of explaining to do. Correcting the omissions results in a total project cost of $225 million. The 25% matching share for that is $56 million. This is about $6 a month for the average household after 15 years after the money's spent. If you believe the omissions were okay, then I would ask that you explain your logic tonight to the audience so everyone can understand it. Again, the omissions were on G&A, parkland, buyouts, and inflation. Keep in mind that we only did one simulation of terracing, and it was based on the narrowest section. We do know that the properties that touch Clear Creek are large enough to comfortably accommodate removal of about 8 million cubic yards and give us a beautiful park. The proposal in tonight's package only accounts for removing 6.7 million cubic yards. It's not an overestimate, it's an underestimate. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ron. Sarah Van Riper.
As a Friendswood resident and Drainage CAT member and a 30-year project manager, I need the city to put the full drainage project cost share of $56 million on the November ballot. You know drainage will pass, and it'll only cost the average resident between $2 to $6 a month. We can afford that. Why is council trying to push a lower number? So I have 6 major points to highlight the deficiency in your thinking. Number 1, some people will give us creekside property, so let's lower the buyout estimates. Unrealistic. Number 2, the feds may only ask Friendswood to pony up 20% when all the other cities in America are ponying up 25%. Unrealistic. Number 3, let's only put cost of labor to dig the terraces. And forget about the cost for overhead, equipment rental, safety, etc. Unrealistic. Number 4, let's not include contingency costs because we've thought of everything. No, forget about paying for any unknowns that might come up, like running into underground obstructions or contaminated soil. This is unrealistic. Number 5, let's assume costs we paid last year will not increase over 15 years, over the life of the project. That's unrealistic. Number 6, let's design the cheapest straight line drainage ditch pipe and forget about maintaining Friendswood's natural beauty and putting a green belt. That's unacceptable. So to not consider all of these 6 points, that's unacceptable in this estimate. So partially funding the Friendswood Drainage Project will be just like the Blackhawk project that ran out of money and years later remains unfinished. So we need to have the full $56 million for our cost share on that drainage bond. And when you cut corners on a project, you don't get a good outcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Jennifer Waxman.
My name is Jennifer Waxman, and I just want to share with y'all, I'm a lifelong resident of Friendswood, and kind of just share our Harvey story. As I sat here writing this afternoon, it's raining just as hard as it did during Harvey. I know it won't be that long of a rain, but nevertheless, I have to wonder how long will it be until we live this flood nightmare again. As far as Harvey goes, the rain started at 8:30 p.m., and by 1 a.m., we had already received 13 inches in just 4.5 hours. That was the predicted amount for 3 days in isolated areas at that time. We received the topmost amount predicted in that 4.5 hours. We knew we were in trouble, and the other end of our street was already underwater, enough that a neighbor who is a firefighter for a neighboring city had already checked a car that was underwater with its headlights still on. We stayed up all night putting stuff up. At 2:30 a.m., I looked outside, and besides the usual runoff, we were still good. I checked 15 minutes later at 2:45 a.m. Clear Creek was rushing down the street, probably about a foot deep. It came in our houses about 5:30 a.m., and at daylight at 6 a.m., I walked outside and realized that our neighbors across the street and one house over were trapped. She is in a wheelchair, and he is bedridden, just coming home from a hospital stay on the Thursday before. My parents, who live across the street from us, they live across the street from us. I talked to them, and I knew it was rising fast. And for someone who is trapped in a bed in a wheelchair, they must have been frantic right then. We immediately called 911 to get a rescue for them, and were told, "I'm sorry, but right now there are 200 people ahead of you, and we're pulling people off of roofs first." No address was given or taken, so we knew no help was coming. The rains continued, and the creek rose. At around 1:15 p.m., we were able to flag down a boat to get them out, a neighbor helping neighbor thing, not emergency crews. By then, the water in my parents' house was thigh deep. Imagine being stuck in a wheelchair in that deep of water. We helped get all the neighbors out, and then we were rescued last out of our neighborhood by boat. We actually lost the neighbor on the other side of them. She got pneumonia from this mess and died. My dad ended up in the hospital sick with intestinal issues during cleanup and almost needed surgery due to the infection. We ended up with 18 inches of water in our house, and across the street they got 27 inches. I need to say that Harvey was our first flood, as our house has always sat high and dry. 9 hours changed all of that. The nightmare continued as many of our neighbors, as it did for many of our neighbors. Where do we go? Where can we stay? Our contractor stole money. We lost $20,000, and all we got were tile floors. A few other things that they had started had to be ripped out and redone. Our house is still not finished, same as many of our neighbors. We cannot go through this again. Please put the full amount requested by your citizen advisory group on the ballot for voting this fall. Due to minimal is just putting a Band-Aid on a broken leg, and we will continue to have flood problems. Just for the record, the rain we received in early May, 3 days, 7 inches total, and Clear Creek was at its tip top. 1 more inch and it would have spilled over. It rose 10 feet on the second night in 3 hours. Upstream is dumping more and more with Pearland and Sagemont's new detention basins, and we have to fully fund this so that a third of our city is not underwater again. Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. Item 8, communications from the public. To comply with the provisions of the Open Meetings Act, City Council may not deliberate on items discussed under this agenda item. The council may refer this item to the city manager or direct this item to be placed on the next regular council agenda. PowerPoint presentations are not conducted during the citizen comment period. Out of respect for those speaking during public comment, please refrain from any outbursts or interjections to include but not limited to applause and/or disparaging noises from the audience. Doing so discourages others from voicing their thoughts and opinions and disrupts the meeting.
And if you haven't done this before, you get 3 minutes. I'll show a yellow card when you have 1 minute left, and then a red card when your 3 minutes are up.
Connie Radiso.
I'm going to use my other 3 minutes. I wanted to clarify that handout that I gave you first of all, this is a horrible setup for hearing back here. It's very difficult to hear. But I wanted to clarify that the handout that I gave you was for a vision of what Clear Creek Greenbelt could become for future generations. And the only intended consideration for the bond was that the park and that you have the vision to design it from the beginning for a future park. The only other thing was in the parks bond, there was $500,000 for both 1776 and then money for buyout properties along there, so that we could apply for grants that are available and look to using those existing properties. The other things I wanted to say was just a few points. The presentation on the bond, removing less dirt to lower the bond amount means fewer houses saved. Terracing that you see in the presentation was designed for 200 feet before the slope, not the 160 feet before the slope that is indicated in the presentation. Again, removing less dirt is going to mean fewer houses saved. The local match is 25%. You can't count on partnerships that might happen. You don't have those yet. I'd also like to see in the future that when we're talking about using seed money, as we are for the Public Works, the water park, and the Friendswood Parkway, that the full amount, the estimated full amount, be disclosed up front. Also, I'm really worried that the water park, if you decide to do that, might kill the other items that are really needed on the parks bond. And if you do decide to go forth to the citizens with the water park, that you put it as a separate proposition. The other thing is somebody mentioned that we're afraid of a blank check, of the city council having a blank check. A bond is exactly the opposite. The amount is limited and the use for that money is very defined. You can not spend that money and then the citizens don't have to pay for those bonds being issued. If you underfund the bond, then you're not going to have enough money to do the project as needed, and you're going to have to come back for another bond. So I encourage you, please, tonight, show us that you're going to do what you meant when you said that you wanted to fix Friendswood flooding problem. Thanks.
Thanks, Connie. William Gilbert.
Mr. Mayor, Council, Madam Secretary, I apologize for not being here earlier. Life sometimes gets in the way. Several other of your constituents have spoke about this issue. The bond itself is not my issue. The underfunding of the bond is my issue. The use of the bond money for the appropriate actions initially, green belts and parks and things like that are wonderful. But there's a large portion of your community that flooded. There's a large portion of your community that needs these things to happen for those primary reasons. And if those secondary reasons come along, fantastic for that. But the primary situation that we're in is that, and I know, I've been in Friendswood 30 years, and from members of this council and other community members that sit behind me, I know I'm a newcomer to Friendswood at 30 years. But the property that I have has been through Allison, Claudette, and you can name them out. If I turned around, the folks behind me could call them all out. I never had water. If you go and look at the northern end of us and the southern end of us, there's been very significant mitigations done. And folks, I'm not an engineer for dirt. But if you look at the northern end of us where it comes across and the southern end where it dumps out, you'll see that we are the bottleneck for it. And the impact to the Friendswood residents was that significant bottleneck. A property that I live in currently, it's been there more than 50 years or right at 50 years. We celebrate 50 years in 2018 of the community being there. Never had water in it. I had 40 inches in it. The mitigations that you do that are very, very significant for the community that sits here, the community that's out there. We need this bond money used appropriately for the immediate needs, the things that will mitigate this. And like I said, if those other things come along with it, wonderful and fantastic moving forward. But the cost of what we just went through, and not just for those of us who had to rebuild, the cost overall to this community was very significant. Don't underfund this. Let's not stop halfway. I ask you to take that into consideration, not just me, but everybody who stands in my position, and fund this completely to take care of those imminent things. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council, Madam Secretary.
Thank you, William. Dave Yelovich.
Good evening. I'm Dave Yelovich. I live over on Whittier Oaks. A few hours ago, I was in San Antonio, and it's amazing how quick you can get to City Hall from San Antonio when the need is there. I felt it important enough to come here tonight to just, one, reiterate what they've just said. We need all the money we can to fund the fixing of this problem that's been here for decades and decades and decades. Unfortunately, I've lived here for decades and decades and decades, and I've seen bonds. James Bonds, he was the mayor. No, he wasn't. But I went back while she was going through the budget, and I looked at the 2013 PowerPoint presentation right on these very screens. And it said we were going to get a nice new Blackhawk Boulevard, basically from 2351 to 528. We all know now that ain't going to happen. Why? Because we ran out of money. We were told in the newspaper by a person here in this room that all that bond money would be spent immediately because we know costs go up. We got to spend it right away. Now, 7 years later, we realize costs go up. Blackhawk isn't as long as we thought it would be. Same thing happened to the El Dorado, Friendswood Link, Whispering Pines extension. That became small because we ran out of money. So I'm urging you to spend the right amount of money because that's what it needs. And plan for it now so the folks that are here 5, 10 years from now don't have to say, I told you so. I found this actually 2 days ago in a seminar I was in. John Ruskin, back in the 1800s, pretty smart businessman, says, quote, "It's unwise to pay too much, but it's also unwise to pay too little. When you pay too much, you lose a little money. That is all. When you pay too little, you sometimes lose everything. Because the thing you bought was incapable of doing the thing it was bought to do. The common balance law of business balance prohibits paying a little and getting a lot. It can't be done. If you deal with the lowest bidder, it is well to add something for the risk you run. And if you do that, you will have enough to pay for something better. I hope we do something better. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Kathy Rogers.
Kathy Rogers, and I'm going to reiterate a lot of things that people have already said, but I would ask in the interest of transparency and voter choice, please disambiguate the individual bond propositions and give voters a clear and consistent choice so they can decide what they want. Don't just lump everything together because, everybody wants drainage. And as Mr. Yelovich said, please fund that adequately because, as ISO 9001 from the 2008 version says, quality is the conformance to requirements and the fitness for use. So we've got to come up with a plan that's fit for use. As people have said before, both the previous speaker and Ms. Van Riper, the 2013 Blackhawk bond didn't get completed. So was that an overpromise or was that an underdelivery? But that is a significant failure in the part of the city from carrying out a bond proposition. A water park, oh, come on. People are digging out from Harvey. And let a commercial endeavor do it if it's viable. But this was never in any of the Parks Board surveys. People never said they wanted a water park. And the liability is going to be horrible. This potential for a 10% tax increase from $53 to $58, not including West Ranch, who pays more, will leave little room for financing projects in the city when we get to build out. So, we're at a critical point right now. And if we load people up with financing now, what are we going to do when we're built out? And the pool, why did we rework the bathrooms at a cost of $484 a square foot for the bathrooms at the pool when the pool had horrible problems? I just think that's the cart before the horse. And again, the use fees should have been paying. And again, everybody knows who's got a pool. And let's face it, lots of people have pools. Lots of subdivisions have pools except where the citizens voted to fill them in. Lots of apartment complexes have pools. So there are plenty of pools, and there's the Natatorium, which Galveston County residents are paying on an extensive year bond. Why can't we use that? And of course, there's no incentive to use it. So, that's a significant problem. Fully fund drainage. I'd rather pay now than dig out later. So I seriously ask, and I didn't flood, but my house was built to 3 feet above Claudette, and the water came lapping up a half a more inch, and it would have been in. So, I ask you to fully fund drainage, and just as a side note on the budget, let's not count on library fines for underwriting anything, because now they're letting at least kids read off their library fines. So I thank you for your time, and again, please disambiguate those bonds.
Thanks, Kathy.